Hello, Laurie. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Tiago. I'm excited to be here. I love your
Yeah,
product, so this will be a fun chat.
me too. We have been talking for a long time. You are an early user of Podsqueeze, but it's the first time we're actually seeing face to face.
Yes,
You just came from Podfest,
I
right?
did.
Which is quite. You we're just talking a little bit about this, which is it's one of the big ones, one of the big conferences in the US around podcasting. The other one is podcast movement, and you're just telling me you've been to both. You're telling
Yes,
me they are a little bit different. So, what differences did you
right.
find?
Yeah, I found podcast movement was a little more corporate oriented, like the big networks and the big syndications were there, and the
Hmm.
speakers tended to come from those backgrounds. Whereas Podfest was a little more grassroots oriented. So if you're an independent like me, the speakers were independent podcasters, so it was just a different focus and a different flavor. There was a
Hmm.
lot of there was a lot of us that were at both, and you got information and you got good content from both. It's just a different way of presenting it. So
Hmm.
it was a very interesting contrast on the two of them.
What is your goal when you go to one of these conferences? Like, do you write down your thing before and say like, yeah, I want to take this out, I want to do this? Because I feel that sometimes when we go to such
Right.
conferences, preparation is key. Otherwise, we might just miss out on things. Do
Yeah.
you what is your goal and how kind of what kind of preparation do you do?
I would love to sit here and say and tell you I prepare and I write down goals, but I don't. um, my goal when I go is really to soak in all the information I can, to learn all that I can. And at Podfest, I actually was looking for guests, those of us that
Mm.
that weren't born with smartphones in our hands, because my audience is
Hmm.
typically over 50. So I was looking for guests on my podcast as well, and there was a whole there's I network in that arena, so there was a whole bunch of people that I knew. We had just been on a podcast cruise,
Mm.
and so we had a
Podcast cruise.
yes,
What
yes.
is that? That's
All right,
amazing.
I'm officially inviting you. Yes, it is.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah, it was initial sailing was in November, 1st of November. And now it's going to be in October of next year. So it was a week of, we learned all about monetizing our podcast. We talked about editing podcasts. We talked about everything. And it was, the founders of this, Michael Neely and Krista and I never can pronounce Krista, sorry, Istokovich. They founded this and started this, and they're going to do this every year and bring in speakers. And just, it's for if you have a podcast, if you want to start a podcast, or if you want to be a guest on podcasts, or if you listen to podcasts. So it
Hmm.
pretty much covers everybody. But yeah, it's
And then
podcasters.
you're in a cruise,
I am
just
on the cruise.
sailing
Yes.
around.
Absolutely. And that depending on the schedule, like if we're at sea days, then we have classes in the morning and training in the morning. And then in the afternoon, we usually have free. And then we come back together and have dinner together and have some training late in
Ah,
the afternoon.
that's so
So we
cool.
really do work. It really is a business
It's
cruise
not
that
only
we
fun.
work. Right, right. And it's podcastersatsea.com. And you can say Lori Lyons invited you, which is LORILYONS, because that's, I get credit for cabins. So yes,
Oh,
you go.
wow. How many people go to such a cruise?
We had 50 on this one, and they're
Ah, so it's a
anticipating
small boat or it's just mixed with other
it's a big
guests?
cruise ship. We're just
Okay,
mixed with other guests. And
got
we
it.
had our own private room for stuff. And then this year so far, we've already got 50. So we'll probably, they're hoping to get 100 for
Mhm.
this cruise. So it'll keep it a small, intimate group. Like I just got back from another cruise called the Marketing Cruise that was 8 days and 453 people. Very
You
big
love
cruise.
cruises, I
I
can
do.
see.
I do. And you learn a lot. You make a lot of really
Yeah,
good
I love that.
connections.
Yeah, I
And
love that
yeah,
concept. It's
yeah,
kind of a hackathon plus or like crash course, and then you go around and you can also meet new people
right.
and visit new places. So that's really
Right.
interesting.
So yeah, we
Uh,
made some really good connections on the podcast cruise, and then several of us were on the same,
mhm,
couple of months later, and then we saw each other at Podfest again. So
mhm.
it's just that continuing the relationship
Yeah,
around podcasts.
yeah. I'm curious to ask you some more questions around the conferences, but before I think it's important also for the listeners to get a little bit of context. So, can you
Yeah,
tell us a bit about your podcast, your background, your industry, and yeah, what kind of podcast do you run?
sure. I own a website design agency, and
Hmm.
most of my clients are over the age of 50. I myself am over the age of 50, and I started my website design agency at 52. So I know a little bit, and I totally taught myself at 52 how
That's
to navigate
amazing.
this technical world. YouTube was, when I started, YouTube was still very technical, and people were putting very, very good learning YouTube videos up. WordPress for Dummies had just come out. So I really kind of just kind of taught myself, and I asked a lot of questions with the company I worked with. And then I started my own company and about 9 years ago, 10 years ago. And part of what I wanted to do as a business owner was get some visibility. I wanted to get
Mm-hmm.
for my own brand and my own self. And a podcast is a great way to do that. So that's
Mm-hmm.
why I originally started the podcast, was to show my expertise, so that when I have a new client comes in that says, "Hey, can you help me a little bit more with my Instagram account?" I can say, "Yes, go listen to this episode and this episode." And we talk
Right.
about, I answer the question really well for you there, and then come back and we'll finish it some more. So I can drive listeners to my podcast that way.
Mm.
Um, and that was really my main reason for doing it at the time, was to just have visibility and expertise.
Right.
And it's really interesting, because when you tell people that you have a podcast, or it's kind of like the equivalent of having a book now. Oh, you have a podcast. Let me
Yeah,
listen to it. So it gives you
that's
that
true.
level of expertise.
Mm-hmm. So it's a podcast about digital marketing for people uh, that are 50 or older, and to kind of teach them about all of these techniques, platforms, and everything, right?
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
and my guess, it's sometimes it's how they use marketing in their business. They may not be a marketing business, but
mhm,
I've one of my very first guests is a dear friend, and she is a YouTube person. She
mhm,
has, I don't know how many YouTube views. So I had her come on and talk about how she built her business on YouTube, which I heard later somebody else said, "Oh, that was really helpful, because I hadn't really thought about YouTube at my age." And
mhm,
she is 66, and she does a lot of YouTube. So it's, my guests come on and they talk about how they use marketing. And then I'll come back in, and the next episode will be,
mhm.
here's some ways that you can specifically use YouTube in your business, or how you get started, or the SEO around YouTube, that kind of thing.
Oh, what an inspiration!
Yeah.
It's definitely a really cool project, and I'm so it seems by talking with you and also with you just shared a little bit, you like podcasting, not only for your business, but it seems that you just also like to hang out with other podcasters, right? Like going on a cruise, and also like enjoying Podfest more maybe than podcast movement. Uh, is it more than business for you? Is it also like a way for you to meet people, to
Oh,
to get a community? Do you like the podcasting community?
oh, absolutely. Good question. Absolutely. And that's one of the things I loved about the podcast cruise is the 50 people that were on that cruise. We became very close.
Mm-hmm.
And some of them I had never met before. So a couple of them I knew a little bit, or maybe we've run across each other at different events or on Zoom. So getting to really establish the community. And then going to Podfest, where, as I mentioned before, it's a lot of independent podcasters.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
How many people go to Podfest
oh,
roughly?
well over 1,000. It could be closer to
Okay.
two. Just the way the venue is, it's hard to tell. And with
Mm-hmm.
all the different
Yeah, yeah,
tracks
of
that
course, yeah.
they have, different learning tracks that you can
And they have
follow.
multiple events going on. They have booths, they have workshops, talks. Is that it?
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
So you rarely saw everybody in one place. And
Mm-hmm.
whereas podcast movement, they had like network keynotes in the morning, so you'd see a lot bigger. And I think if I had to guess, I'd say they were about the same size, just a slightly different audience.
Mm, okay. What were you just came from Podfest? Are there any specific things that you learned that you'd like to share with us? Something that you like, wow, that changes everything.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. One of my goals this year is to monetize my podcast, which I have not
Hmm.
really wanted to do, but I also didn't want to spend a lot of time monetizing with ads. I get
Yeah.
it. I don't want to worry
Is there
about
any other
compression.
way?
Yes, absolutely. And that's what I learned at Podfest. Um,
Okay.
for example, one of the gentlemen that I heard Adam, shout out to you, is he talks about how to monetize his podcast with a podcast mini series lead magnet. For those of us in the marketing world, the lead magnet is how you initially contact and draw your clients in by giving them something of
Hmm.
value. So he talks about how to use your podcast to do that. The other thing that I thought was brilliant to drive downloads was he would say, we're going to teach about this. Here's one of the top 5 ways to monetize your podcast. Item number 1, go to my episode number 324, listen to my episode because there's the information. Now ask me questions. Let's spend our time asking questions because you can
Mm.
get that. I've already given you that information, and I said I'd give you 5 tips here. So here are the 5 tips. Go to my
Mm.
podcast and listen. And I thought that's really kind of cool. So, you can carry that in a lot of different places just to drive traffic to your podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But he also talked about, how to have your ideal client on your podcast and how to follow up with the relationships and how to possibly build a client relationship from that, which I don't focus on too much, although I
Mm-hmm.
will start more because I see my podcast as more of an educational service.
Right.
Yes, I want to build my visibility with it, and now I want to make money with it. So it'll have a
Mm-hmm.
combination of
Yeah,
goals with it.
totally. When I first started my own podcast and I started thinking about monetization, I was exactly on the same page. I didn't want to do ads. Ads are annoying. Something I don't want to just be talking about, my topic and suddenly have to. And now for this ad
Right.
and like kind
Right.
of read something or something that I don't totally believe in. However, sponsorships can pay really well, which is
Absolutely.
also they are still interesting if you find some good partnership. But uh, yeah, you can make money in other ways. You can
Yeah.
create communities, Patreons, and as well. And this is really interesting because my podcast is also around entrepreneurship, and I've interviewed people in the world of selling startups, and they say that when someone has a podcast, when the founder has a podcast, it's so much easier to connect with them and create this trust bond that
Right.
then ultimately helps actually selling or acquiring the startup. So, and this is making money. It's not directly, but you just sold
Yeah.
your startup because of your podcast, even if
Yeah.
it's not huge, it doesn't have a huge audience.
Well, and
So,
also another way to look at it too is as you become more visible in your marketplace, then it becomes more of a cachet thing to work with you. So I've actually raised my prices based on the
mm,
following that I'm getting and the expertise and the the reputation that I'm getting from that.
got it.
So it
It's
can
branding,
happen
right?
in
It gives
yeah,
you more credibility and then more retention,
exactly.
and you can increase the
Exactly.
prices. Wow.
Although I will
Yeah.
say I've never really been into it. If Podsqueeze wants to come on and and do some sponsorship, I'll be happy to talk to you. Because I love your product. So
Definitely, definitely. Now, I would love to talk about that as well. Actually, I mean, let's just jump into it since you mentioned it. I think I've converted more than 200 episodes, a lot of episodes with
yeah.
us. How do you use Podsqueeze? How does Podsqueeze fit in your flow?
Yeah, I use Podsqueeze in a lot of different ways. I don't right now, and this may change. I don't go back and I don't put the show notes on my podcast.
Hmm.
I'm looking into that and if it's worth going back and doing it for me for SEO purposes. So, but it's there if I want it. I have every one of my episodes are on Podsqueeze. You save them for me. So if I want to go back and add something that I haven't used in the past, it's all there for me. And I have a fancy dancy spreadsheet and it's, I've got I can link to Podsqueeze so I can put the link right there in so my team knows. I have a team. I have somebody that edits my podcast. I did have a VA that would do all of the graphics and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm doing that just simply because life happened. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
so I can go back and put that link in my spreadsheet, and I can go back and get anything I want. I can pull up the tweets. I pull up the
Mm-hmm.
quotes, and you're always adding new stuff. Most of what I use right now are the show notes because those are the show
Okay.
notes, and I'll go in and just play with them a little bit to make them my voice. But
Right.
considering how long it would take, oh my
Mm-hmm.
gosh, it's great. And I am, I, I own a website design agency and I build websites, but I am not a hugely technical person.
Hmm.
If I go on something and I can't figure it out within 5 minutes, I'm gone because I get
Yeah.
frustrated. Your platform immediately was like, okay, this is easy to use. I don't have to think about this. I just upload what I need. You do all your magic behind the scenes, and I get everything that I want and need at the time. And then things that I don't even know I want and need in the future are
Hmm.
still there for me. So I love it. I love your product. So thank you for doing
Amazing. Yeah,
it.
thank you so much as well for all of your support. And also, we worked together, and you gave us a lot of feedback that we implemented in the platform. I'm
Yes.
curious how you have a team. How do you work with the team? Like, what's the process? When do they take over the flow?
Yeah, the flow right now is kind of choppy, honestly.
Hmm.
But I still, it doesn't prevent me from putting my episodes out because of products like Podsqueeze that will let me make it easy for me to do some of the things a team would do. So I
Hmm.
record now, and I record actually in my private Facebook group. I don't know if that will change when Facebook changes their allowing third party to come in.
Hmm.
But I do that because it holds me accountable. If I announce that I'm going to do this every Tuesday at 1 o'clock Eastern, then I know I'm going to have to do it. And I have a
Yeah.
guest and I'm going to have, so that was one of the drawbacks. And one of the things that took me so long is I just kept putting it off. So I thought, aha,
Mm.
this will hold me accountable and this works. So I do it as a podcast interview. I don't do it as a Facebook Live. Hi, Tiago. Good to see you. I started and that's really annoying and I don't do that anymore.
Hmm.
But so then once it's a Facebook Live, I download everything and I do it on Zoom. So I download everything and then I have, Google Drive folders for the audio and the video because I do take video. And then when I have a month's worth, I send it to my audio editor. He does all the audio editing and then
Hmm.
sends it back to me. And then I just upload it from there. I don't do a lot of editing because it's live. Since we
Right.
do record them as live interviews, I don't do a lot of editing.
Yeah.
If I have to, I will. I mean, if we, you know, if something weird happens, I certainly will
Hmm.
edit it out. But I really don't have to do that much to it.
Did it, did
I've
it did something ever kind of weird happen during a live? Something uh, it was not supposed to.
yeah. A couple months ago, I was interviewing somebody. It was really interesting because usually I know my guests. I've met them in some way, shape, or form, and they reached out to me, and I really liked her topic, so I had her on. So I didn't really know her, and I told her before it started, I said I've been dealing with this horrible coughing. I
Hmm.
haven't had to cough a lot, but I'm also going to be talking a lot. If I start coughing, just keep talking. And it did. I'm like, 25 minutes into the interview, all of a sudden I could feel it coming on, mute real quick. And I probably spent, I don't know, 5 minutes just coughing.
Oh.
You could see me coughing, and people were like, "Are you okay?" But thankfully, I was able to edit so that, like mute myself. And bless her heart, she just kept talking. She
So
was
much go
great.
must go on, right?
I know. And you can see her eyes were getting, because when you have a coughing fit, you look
Yeah.
like you're dying on the other
Oh
side. It's like,
yeah.
should I call 911?
I imagine the people that are watching live and they were like, "Why is the guest just keeps talking?
No,
What the
she was
interviewer just?"
she was awesome. She was great. She did. She just carried the whole thing. And finally, I was like drinking water, and I'm like, I'm coming back on.
Okay.
And so yeah, then I unmuted, and she was like, oh, thank goodness, I was running out of things to say. But yeah, so
But I
that was
like
kind
that
of fun.
you kind of prepared her before, like, "Hey,
Yeah,
this might happen. Show must go on, so
right,
I will just mute myself and cough my lungs
right,
out,
right.
and
Yeah,
then once it's
yeah.
out, then I am finished, I'll get back. Just keep talking."
Just keep talking. I'm okay. Just keep talking. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
but I thought I'd made it all the way through, and I was like, dang. So I didn't, but
Um, I'm curious, and as we are getting a bit closer to the end as well, I think your whole journey is very inspiring, and I guess there's a lot of people, maybe that are above, I don't know, 50 as well, in the same range of people that you mentioned you talk to, that might think, yeah, it's too hard to start, right? Like, I've never done this, I've never started a podcast. Um, so maybe specifically for a podcasting, but I guess we can apply this to anything really. What would be your advice? for someone to go, stop saying I cannot do it.
Right.
It's whatever. It's too late, or I don't know this. It's not for me, and kind of change a little bit the mindset to actually think, no, I can do it, and what should be the first steps actually to get into starting their first project, being that a podcast or whatever.
Right, right. My simple advice is just do it. Just start. It doesn't matter because in today's world, even though we have the Instagram perfect worlds, real life is not perfect. So,
Mm,
you can have coughing fits. You can have, there's different ways to do things that, like, I was procrastinating on my podcast and somebody said, I do mine
mm,
on Facebook Live. It's like, oh, that's brilliant. I'll do that. And that was very simple for me because all you do is you go on Facebook and you hit a button and it says go
mm,
live and you can do it. And there's really polished podcasts. There's podcasts that people just, do sitting at Starbucks. There were people doing podcasts on the cruise, sitting out like with the wind and on the ocean. So if you're thinking about starting a podcast, just think everybody has a story. Everybody has experiences. Everybody has things that have happened to them in life, especially when you get a little older and even
mm,
younger. My son's 26 and I keep telling him you really should do a
mm.
podcast because you have a lot of value to offer. He started his own company at
Wow.
22.
Mm-hmm.
So he's 4 years into the entrepreneur and doing really, really well. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like everybody has something that they can teach somebody or that
Mm-hmm.
they can share. So I would say just start talking. If you're thinking about a podcast, just pick up your phone and
Yeah,
start talking.
it's easy. I think, is there a kind of a shame? Do people are a bit shy to say to their family that, when they are around that age, they're like, now he's starting a podcast. Is there something that people often might feel? And if so, how can someone go against that and actually do it, and kind of ignore the people around?
Yeah, I think making it simple. And my mom is 93. She still doesn't understand what a podcast is. Even though I've run it through her on the
I
car
thought you were going
radio
to
and
say, and
stuff.
she's starting a podcast. Like, wow, that's amazing.
Now that would be something. But yeah, but I think that the perception it's and I'll put it like writing a book. There are a lot of different types of books out there. Some of them are really good. Some of them are New York Times bestsellers. Some of them are just people's stories, but they can be very simple and they can be very complex. So if you're thinking of starting a podcast,
Hmm.
just keep it simple. Start with your phone. You don't have to have them. We see the Joe Rogan effect with the beautiful studio and
Yeah.
the 4 hours and the name guests and the millions of dollars. That's not all
Yeah.
of us.
You don't
That's the
even need
exception of
video,
the
right? That's the beauty. You just need a
exactly.
mic. Hmm.
Exactly. You can put it right there on your phone and the only thing I would say is get a good mic.
Mm.
You know,
Yeah.
the good
And
mic
that's
is far
that's
more
you can
important than
get
the camera.
one for under 100
Yeah.
bucks or something, or around that, and it's already super good, right?
Oh
Even
yeah.
for
Well,
$50 you can
there's
get it.
even microphones you can attach to your iPhone that are if you're doing
Yeah.
interviews that are actually really, really good for like
Hmm.
$30 US. So,
Yeah,
you know,
totally.
doesn't have to be expensive to get started. Just
Laurie,
start.
that's great. That's great inspiration. I think, hopefully inspiring a lot of listeners that to start their own pod. Uh, Once again, what's the name of your podcast? Where can we see you? Your socials, tell us everything.
Yeah, the name of my podcast is called The Encore Entrepreneur, ENCORE.com. So that's the website for it, but it's on Apple, it's on Spotify, it's all on all the normal hangout places. The EncoreEntrepreneur.com. And it's for people who weren't born with smartphones in their hands. So
Mhm.
it's, just business tips, business ideas. So yeah, check it out. Check it out, review and subscribe.
Amazing. I like it. Talking like a true pro. I will also link everything in the show notes of this episode.
Perfect.
Laurie, once again, thank you so much for coming to the show and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you for having me. And it's great to finally get to meet eye to eye.
Yeah, likewise.
This podcast is brought to you by Podsqueeze, an essential tool for podcasters that creates show notes, timestamps, clips, and more. Visit podsqueeze.com and use the code PODCASTER for 20% discount in the first 3 months. We release a new episode every Tuesday and Thursday. See you in the next episode of Lessons from a Podcaster.